All right. Where was Uz? Well, we'll look at that in a minute. We'll look at that in a minute. Do what? Close to what?
It's not close to Detroit.
No, probably not. Probably not. I did a lot of looking, okay? I did a lot of looking, and there is a wide variety of opinions, and that's all I really can say about that. Now, I will say this, now, if this matters at all, the Greek Old Testament, okay, the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, this is the Old Testament that Jesus in the first century would have used in the synagogue, okay, just for, it matters what the Septuagint says, and it helps us in understanding, since it's very early, it's a very early dated document, the Septuagint is. It's a Greek translation of the Hebrew. There is an appendix to the Greek Old Testament that says in the appendix that this was probably close to Arabia. Now, the East, I don't know. So anyway, I just take that for whatever it's worth. Yeah.
I've been watching some videos on where the Garden of Eden was, and it was in Kuwait.
Well,
it was right down there on the Gulf, and
I would say that anyone who thinks they know exactly where where the Garden of Eden is full of it.
well, no.
If they think they know where it is, they're full of it. I'm sorry, I'll just tell you.
Well,
they don't know. They do not know.
The four rivers,
Yes.
and they showed where they
But geologically, we do not know what it was like before the flood, pre-diluvian, antediluvian makeup. I mean, the world was not like what we have today. So we're just guessing. We're just guessing. They're still there, so you can get, so if you'll just take that, it could be anywhere in 1,000-mile range in that area. Well, right, Pishon, and there's two, and yeah, those two rivers disappear. We don't know where they are, but we do know the Tigris and Euphrates. So anyway, sorry to be so blunt, but I just get tired of people saying they know stuff that's not possible to know. Yeah, I know. Yes. Yeah, you're guessing it was. Yes. That's right. But Uz is a mystery, and we'll do a little bit more and look in that in a minute. But I want to talk about Job for just a second. What's the description of Job tell you about him as a businessman?
He was an astute businessman.
Must have been. He had a lot of animals to take care of. He was very successful. Yes, a very successful businessman. Because if you itemize all that guy was worth, I mean, go down back to, and I understand that ancients, especially ancients that wrote the Old Testament, the numeric value of numbers is not as important as the symbolic meaning of numbers. So if you look at this and you say, he had 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Those are great numbers in Hebrew. It's like Job had the perfect family. Perfect balance, 7's a perfect number, 3's a perfect number. Okay. He had 7,000 sheep, and by the way, that would include goats. Sheep and goats grazed together in ancient times. Jesus quite often talked about sheep and goats, separating them. They grazed from ancient times. 500 yoke of oxen would be 1,000 oxen. That's 1,000 is an important number as well. 500 donkeys, a large number of servants. Doesn't even name how many servants. I mean, he had so many people working for him. They don't even name them. I mean, they don't even number them, okay? He had a large business. He was the greatest superlative man among all the people of the East. And I say, well, what about the East? What does that mean? Anything east of Israel. That's about, I seriously, it was funny, the most scholarly Job commentary that I found that's got more Hebrew in it than I ever care to know in 10 lifetimes says that east means anything east of Israel. That's what he said. So I'd say, okay, I'll go with that. I'll go with that. Whatever you say.
And Paul, he was a loving father.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. You jump to the next one. A family man. He was a family man. Okay? By the way, it doesn't mention his wife yet. Okay? She makes a cameo. How about as a man of God? What evidence do we have of him being a man of God? Burnt offerings. Man, this guy. For his children. Right. Right. For a birthday, he was very concerned. I know you have to take a lot of this. There's some parts of this that make me pause, okay? And I'll ask you in a minute what might make you pause. But it makes me pause to think, he thought they might curse God in a birthday party?
Well, this wasn't really a birthday party. I think it was just, it sounds to me like they were
Well,
having parties every day.
It does sound that way, and it could be that. It could be that.
And they might have been drinking a lot of wine, and he might
Well, yeah, and then you curse God in a drunken stupor or something, I guess. I don't know. I would think so. I would think so. Well, and yeah. They were a very close family. They're a very close family. Yeah. Job didn't get an invitation, did he? I don't. They're just things. There are things about the storyline that are extraneous, and that's why it sounds a little fairy tale-ish in places. Okay? It's not that it's untrue. It's that the writer is zeroing in on certain aspects of the story that are relevant. Okay? That's what it's about. Okay?
He cared enough for them to make sure they were right with God. He said they may have sinned.
Yes. Just in case. Just in case.
wise.
Yeah.
I think that the main point is that this man who was so well off suffered greatly.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't, his riches would not keep him from the suffering he went through.
Interestingly, the way that again, I don't know Hebrew, but I read people who know Hebrew, okay? They say that the way the Hebrew is structured, the writing it makes it appear that the riches came as a result of his devotion to God. Even before we get to the further discussion, just the way this thing is organized, it appears to be that God was blessing him because he was devoted to him. This is Joel Osteen on steroids here, okay? You know, God's favoring you because you're good. God's favoring you because you believe in Jesus. Well, Job, he's being favored because he sacrifices. He's a devoted.
Has a lot of course correction on that. The Old Testament does hint at that in places. So that
Yeah.
Jesus' question.
The Proverbs are absolutely full of that. Proverbs are full of it.
But Jesus
Yes.
does a lot of course correcting in that.
Yes. So does David in the Psalms. There's a lot of self-correction in the Old Testament. There is that God blesses, and this is true. God blesses the faithful. This is true in a general sense. It's absolutely true. He not only will bless you, but he is blessing you, no matter what happens in your life at the present time. And Jesus addressed it also. But David, in his cries, his imprecatory psalms, his complaint psalms, there's a bunch of them. You cannot go through a day's reading in the Psalms and not run into a complaint written by David or one of the psalmists. So it's not always tea and roses, because you're a believer. Yeah.
It's a perfect example of when we're in tough struggles, not to say God's the reason why we're in it. And when,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I will nuance something you said. Sometimes God is behind the trouble people have.
Well, I know, but
Sometimes, sometimes,
it's not our place.
not all the time. Right? It's not, but sometimes.
We can't say that, though,
No, I wouldn't.
not definitely.
I wouldn't.
Well, we should just say that he's punishing us for our iniquities, because we do iniquities every day and don't even realize it.
Right. Anything give you pause about this story so far?
I tell you what gives me a big problem.
What's
The
that?
fact that Satan and God was actually having a conversation.
Okay, we haven't got that far yet. You're jumping ahead. First 5 verses, and then we'll get to that. That gives me pause a lot.
That does not give me pause, because
Okay.
Satan was an angel, and he had a right to be there.
Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And yeah, got you heard.
The thing that concerns me most in these first 5 verses is offering sacrifices on behalf of his children.
Yeah.
In case. Now,
Just in
several folks
case.
in here tonight have said that that's an admirable thing, and it can be viewed as that. It can also be viewed as what you might call spiritual anxiousness.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Anxiety, yes.
Yeah, that is what causes me a little bit of pause.
He sees God as a God to be appeased constantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
But he loves God.
he loves God. He's devoted to him, and he serves him obediently. Yes, yes.
And just on the first 5 verses again, he's doing it on their behalf. They're not doing it on their behalf.
No.
So there's a new term I heard this week. I've heard helicopter parent.
Okay,
There's a new one,
okay.
a lawnmower parent. That's one that just moves the obstacles out of the way.
Okay,
And that's what he's doing. He says, you're not going to
Okay.
take care of yourself. I'm going to
Okay.
take care of you.
I'll take care of you. Okay, okay, okay. Yeah,
Well, I must be suffering from spiritual anxiety, and I agree with you, it is probably that. But I pray for my children that God will
Okay.
forgive them of their sins and open their eyes, because 2 of my children are not saved. I
Yeah.
mean, they don't even believe, they're trying to be agnostics like their dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really worry about them dying in that condition.
Yes.
So I pray every day.
Right,
that God
right,
will-
right.
The difference between that and this, you're praying for God to help them. He's doing a religious rite in their place.
Atonement by proxy.
He's actually not, they're not.
Well, that's the way they.
Yeah, he's not praying for them.
They offer themselves. He's doing it for them.
Right,
Oh, I see what
Right,
you mean now.
right.
Okay.
but this is part of the story that shows that Job goes way above and beyond what's required of a regular man of God. Okay? And that's the emphasis here. Although that does give me pause. He does have a high anxiety. But it might be called just conscientious. He's extremely conscientious. Yeah,
Well,
like,
it's not a big sacrifice when you got a crowd that much animals he has.
yeah.
Sure, I'll do that.
Sure. Yeah, but it's salvation by proxy, I think. Yeah.
With the animals he had,
Mm-hmm.
if you're a farmer or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
he must have been doing a lot of business in the area or even far area to have that many donkeys to carry burdens and camels.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just have donkeys and camels to have donkeys and camels because they eat grass, and sooner or later you don't have enough grass left
Mm-hmm.
for your sheep and.
But you don't know how much land this guy owns either. He's the greatest man of the East, which means that's moral quality, but when you talk about greatest, it's his sphere of influence is huge. He's a big man, owns a lot of things. He owns a lot. He's got a huge business. You could say he was the biggest businessman of the East.
That greatest might mean that.
Yeah, do what? I'm sorry. Right. And that would be 500 a yoke of oxen. That's a lot of farming going on. That is a lot of farming. That is. And now that's farming, and then the donkeys are used to bear burdens, to ride, and also for farming purposes. to haul equipment around. I'm guessing he had heavy equipment to help him plow.
You know, it almost makes him sound to be like he is a ruler without being a ruler. He's in charge of.
We find out he definitely was a ruler of some kind, because as we proceed through, it's clear he had a seat at the city council. He was one of the big shots. Yeah, he definitely was.
Like he took care of a lot of people, feeding them and,
Yeah.
and all of these different. I mean,
Yes.
That's what my mind runs through when you start.
Now, see, how many camels did he have? 3,000? That's transportation.
For 3,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of transportation.
And remember, he had to feed his servants. He had a lot of
Yes.
people.
And he had sheep and goats, 7,000
5,000 donkeys.
and 5,000. Mm-hmm.
But we don't know how much
Were
this.
more of beast, of burden.
They could carry for long distances. Sure.
They also milk camels.
Okay.
Eat 'em.
We don't know how much of this was given to him.
I think camels are considered unclean animals. I don't think they would eat a camel. Yeah.
We don't know how much of this was given to him as payment either, because back
I don't
then,
know.
a lot of stuff, animals and stuff.
Barter?
was given, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about the particulars, the ideas, and you could follow a lot of rabbits, on this one. But just to give you and 1,000 rabbits. But in this case, he's got thousands of animals to run a big agriculture business. He has a beautiful family that's there. This is life as it should be. This is life as it should be. And that's the picture that the writer of Job is doing. He said, this is the way it ought to be. Everybody ought to live like this, okay? But, of course, not everybody lives like that. Textual notes quickly, Uz is nowhere in Israel. That was the only thing I could absolutely tell you. There is no place called Uz anywhere in Israel. So you just guess. Is it Arabia? Possible, okay? East of Israel, I covered all this. The name Job is not Jewish. It is not a Jewish name.
Well, they weren't Jews back then, possibly, because that was.
There's a great deal of disagreement on when this was written. I've got some that say, well, this was written around the time of the Babylonian exile. Well, that's like in the 500s BC. That's not 1500 BC. That would make it not one of the older books. So who knows? There is a timelessness about this, a lack of specific identifiers to tell us much about this. Job, for all we know, was a Gentile who worshiped God. He was a God-worshiping person, probably not Jewish, not an Israelite, okay? Because we just don't have any evidence. His name is not Jewish, and he didn't live in Israel. So, Iraqi.
His friends' names aren't Jewish either, are they?
What's that?
The friends' names aren't Jewish either.
No, they're not. They sound almost Babylonian. I mean, they sound that way, but again, don't take my word for it. It just doesn't sound that way. Let's keep going. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord. That word angels is literally translated sons of God, okay? NIV, I think, correctly renders this angels. Those of you in the TLC class on Tuesday, we've talked about the sons of God marrying the daughters of men. Every single example in the Old Testament of sons of God has to do with angels. That's why I think it's difficult to interpret early Genesis there with the intermarrying and breeding of people among angels. But anyway, they present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him. He's blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." Okay. He's proud of him, and this is simply proving what we've observed in the first 5 verses. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? How many times have we prayed for a hedge of protection, right? And here it is, the Satan says, you spoiled him. You protected him. You've blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your power. But on the man himself, do not lay a finger. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Quick note here, sons of God are angels. And it's not just Satan. The NIV, sadly, and all translations do, drop the definite article, the, but the word is the in the Hebrew instead of a, or Satan, or just simply Satan. It's the Satan. And in some, and note here that I did not capitalize the word Satan because Satan means enemy in Hebrew. It means enemy. It's just simply an enemy, adversary. In fact, if you look in the NIV, down in the footnotes, it will say adversary.
So it's
Okay.
a title and not a name.
It appears that way, yes.
Lucifer is his name. Or was.
Well, we don't know. Okay, we don't know that. That's the problem.
Really? Why don't we? It's in the Bible.
Well, boy, do we want to go down that hole? I got a couple of passages I'm thinking of. Well, do you remember the prophet Micaiah? He was a prophet he prophesied to Ahab, told Ahab, you're going to lose this battle. And then Ahab said, or no, it wasn't Ahab, I'm sorry. It was Jehoshaphat and maybe it was Ahab. Was it Ahab? Anyway, Micaiah said, he said, well, God has sent lying spirits to work through these false prophets. God sent lying spirits. What? Okay. Now, if you're like me, I'm going like, whoa, wait a minute here. God has control of lying spirits? Yes, he does. He has control of everything. But if he wants to. Right. Now, the lying spirit is, this could be,
Maybe it's someone he wants to destroy.
this guy is in the court, he is in the court of the angels. Now, if you're going to say this is the devil, well, the devil doesn't have any place there. He was driven out of heaven eons ago. So, who is this guy?
He's not a son. He's not a son, because he's listed something separately.
Yeah.
I've been working problems all week with knowns and unknowns.
Okay.
We know that for a fact.
Okay.
It's listed separately here. So the sons of God came, and Satan came with him.
Yes.
Didn't say he was one of them.
Right.
But he has
That's correct.
He has the ability to be in the presence of God.
Yes.
So that's,
He had some right to be there. You don't appear before God without a right.
and a voice.
Yes, he did.
I'm not physical, so a voice to talk.
Yes. And as a prosecutor, it tastes a lot like a courtroom, doesn't it? You have a prosecutor and a defense attorney. It's a council. It's a heavenly council of some kind. On a certain day, it says this council happens. And here is an adversary called the Satan, if you will. And the Satan says, basically, you've spoiled him. He serves you because you give him everything. He's got a great life, and that's why he serves you. You don't bless him because he's righteous. He's righteous because you bless him. Okay, that's a big difference. Okay.
He might have been telling the truth, but he was a party pooper. He really was.
Are you talking about Satan in this case?
He was a party pooper.
Oh,
So, are you saying that at this moment here, this is in the spiritual realm? Because,
I am.
and it's a court going on in the spiritual realm, and Job is kind of there, but he's not there, meaning,
Job's not there, no.
that's what I'm saying, he's not.
But he is the subject. He is the subject of an accusation by a heavenly adversary called the Satan, who says he serves you because you treat him right. you spoil him. You bless him tremendously, and that's the reason he serves you. It isn't that he's righteous and that you bless him. It's that it's a quid pro quo. It's a deal you guys have made. You bless him. He serves you, and then you bless him, and he knows that. So it goes on. Okay.
What bothers me is if he's not Satan, as in the devil, then.
Who is he?
Well, that's not what.
Is that your question? Oh, okay.
What I was gonna
Because that's the one I always come down to. Who is he?
What bothers me is, why is he referred to the same thing as what Satan is doing, roaming from end to end of the earth?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what is brought about in other books, that he's roaming the land as a lion, waiting to devour. And so that was kind of used here,
Yeah.
not saying totally, but it makes you think.
It does. I think we've drawn, I'm just cautioning us not to be too quick about drawing that conclusion that this is the devil like we understand Satan to be today, because he is clearly identified today. We know he is the enemy. And Peter says in 1 Peter 5, he's a roaring lion. Yeah, we got that. In Revelation, he is well described. The great dragon, the serpent that was at the beginning. It seems that we don't know much about the devil in the Old Testament, do we? You know, it sounds like something that God progressively revealed through time, and then when we get to the New Testament, he begins to come more into focus. That God begins to reveal more specifically to the prophets and the apostles what the devil is.
But it seems like that I've seen in the New Testament, some of the apostles referring to him, Satan, as the devil, that old dragon, that old dragon. And he goes on and describes him. So I think it's Satan. I don't have any problem with that.
That's fine.
And I don't have any problem with Genesis 6, the angels, because these were fallen angels and they had unusual offspring. And no wonder God had to destroy the earth with flood, because the angels they were teaching their children to be wickeder and wickeder.
I think
it was multiplying.
my only misgiving about equating Satan here in Job with the Satan that we have identified in New Testament writings is that what's he doing in heaven with the angels? I don't get that. I think you have a problem there. That here, if he is evil, if the adversary is evil, and it says in Habakkuk that God won't look upon evil, then tell me, what is he doing there? I mean, what's going on there that he can have this discussion?
I was tempted to say that maybe this happened before the fall of the angels. Maybe this was before the fall. But
Well,
I don't think it was.
we're in deep water there.
Because
I don't know
that
about
was
that.
already in the garden.
We are in uncharted waters there. I don't know about that.
Staying in this close context here of what we have.
But I appreciate your thinking about it. It's
Problem solving, learning, no. We know that whatever reason, this Satan has a purpose, okay?
yes.
And I think we have to look at that.
What was his purpose?
So I was gonna elaborate.
Okay. Okay.
We do know he has the ability, I'm not saying he, the entity, has the ability to move between this heavenly realm, this presence of God,
Yes, he
to
does.
earth, back and forth. So he has witness to that environment. And he's questioning God, okay? Now, what's the purpose? Now, I'm not gonna jump too far ahead, I'm gonna be careful here.
Oh, okay. You're fine.
Is, the purpose is for us. Because through this demonstration, the devil is saying something that is well thought of during the time of the Jewish environment, or those pre-Christ, that you're only wealthy because God favors you. Therefore, if you're wealthy, you must be favored. Okay? That's going to be dispelled. Okay? And he's going to demonstrate to them that just wealth doesn't make a person holy in this case. It is not tied to earthly possession. Last learning. We ourselves consider our lives to be our most precious possession. He's stating it's not. Your most precious possession is your relationship with God.
Okay.
And that is a significant learning here that you couldn't have without that accuser, that individual there to demonstrate that question.
Yeah.
So the purpose, he's a question.
I think, could I just tweak one thing you said? You said that the Satan was questioning God. He was questioning Job.
Right, right. But I mean.
He was questioning whether Job, he was accusing, of course, and this is, again, a tie-in with the idea of an adversary is someone that will accuse you or slander you. And so he slanders Job unfairly and says, he is serving you because you treat him so well, that he doesn't really love you, is really the question. He doesn't really love you. He doesn't serve you because he loves you. He serves you because you're good to him. That it's a servant-master relationship in which you just keep blessing him because he keeps serving you, and you just bless him. So it goes back. It's a quid pro quo. He's accusing him of a deal, of some kind of deal.
But he's also saying, in this case, I'm saying questioning God only, so you're offering this, and that's how you're earning his Lord.
Right.
So he's questioning God. You have to.
It's an earning thing. Yes. And that he's earned it. That Job has earned it, and that Job knows it. He knows it. So, yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of push the brakes a little bit on the idea that this is the devil because he's appearing in heaven, and I personally would have a problem with that. Let's keep going. One day, and because here's the catastrophe, one day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. So now he has lost his donkeys and his oxen. That's a lot of animals. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. Well, that's a considerable loss. That's several thousand animals and servants. While he was still speaking, it's like one after the other, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. That's a lot of camels. They put the servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you.
We just made a change here from what people do to people to a force of nature.
Yeah, the lightning, the fire from heaven, the wind that killed his children, and then people.
We think of God controlling the weather and stuff, but here, Satan is controlling it.
Mm-hmm.
No, because God is allowing it. God has to.
Yes.
Well, I
God does.
understand that,
Yeah.
he's allowing all of this.
But is he the active agent?
No.
He is not the active agent. Okay. Now there's going to be a statement made in a moment that when the Satan appears again and challenges, that makes the same accusation against Job again, a second time, after losing everything that he's lost here. And he says, how is it that you incited me against him? That God even accepts responsibility for being incited, by allowing Satan to do this. God is taking responsibility. He's taking responsibility by allowing it, okay? Anyway, so this is the catastrophe, and Job's response is, at this, Job got up and tore his robe, shaved his head. He fell to the ground in worship. That is conventional grief. That's what they did when you grieve. You tore your robe, you shave your head. He fell to the ground in worship. He said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And in all of this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. He really was. What does Job's response tell us about his attitude toward God? He loved God?
It's yours to do.
What's that?
It's yours to do.
Yeah, it's God's. It's all God's anyway. Yeah, Lord gave it, the Lord took it away. I'm always challenged by Job, his response here. Very challenging. I tend to throw a hissy fit. I think probably I'm not alone in that.
That last sentence is really telltale. That last sentence.
Yes, in all this, Job did not sin.
Well,
Which one?
by did not sin,
By, mm-hmm.
nor charge God foolishly. So is charging God a sin? I'll leave that open.
Well, it depends on why you're doing, I mean, if you're in agony and you start.
Some of the Psalms sound very much like they're charging him with wrongdoing. They are complaints. They don't say, God, you're sinning against me. But there are times when the writer, and Job later, complains that God is mistreating him.
Well,
Well,
and
he wasn't
Jesus on
lying.
the cross, remember, didn't sin.
Why? Why have you left me?
He didn't say, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. The question is, if we say, God, why are you doing this to me? Is that probably an inappropriate response? Obviously, it wouldn't be the case.
Yeah, I think there's a difference. Charging God with wrongdoing, that would be very close to blasphemy, I guess.
I think you'd strike you.
In other words, why would God kill innocent people? Is that, okay, did I charge God by saying, did God do something wrong?
You're asking questions.
I'm asking questions. But
Yeah.
if I said, God, you have killed these people, why did you do that? That's inappropriate. That's never a conversation.
That sounds pretty similar, though. Those two statements,
Yeah.
they sound very similar.
When he sent them into war against some nations, he had them kill all of the children too, and the babies.
Yes.
And God required it. And so, well, he's
Yep.
doing it for a good reason. He doesn't always tell us what his reasons are, but I'm sure he
Yep.
has good reasons for
Yep.
everything he does.
Well-
Maybe it struck them with some kind of a plague, if they hadn't got off, or maybe the children are better off because they would go to heaven or whatever.
It's easy, it would have been easy for Job to say, I've worked so hard for this, and I've been so good to my family, why? And he wouldn't have been wrong, he wouldn't have had wrongdoing in doing that, because he's not accusing God, he's just asking why. And he asks why repeatedly later on, after he loses his health. He's not cursing God, he's not blaspheming God. Right. And that seems to be where the line is. We don't accuse God of doing something that is wrong, although sometimes we get close. We get close. Well, let's look at see here. On another day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present himself before him. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. I read an interesting, a guy who, again, knows Hebrew, and he paraphrases it. I'll paraphrase his paraphrase, is, the Lord said, where you been?
Yeah, that's what I
And Satan says, oh, just messing around. Just messing around. I mean, that's pretty much the answer. I was going around, back and forth through the earth, just messing around. Not really any of your business, but see, I mean, it really has that tinge to it. I've just been going around. I'm not going to tell you what I've been doing. But God already knows what's been going on. The angels have been telling him. So then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Here we go again. There is no one on earth like him. He's blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil, and he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. God allowed it. It's hard to say, well, I think this is important, especially when we're dealing with suffering people. God allows certain things to happen. But I'm going to tell you something. Job losing everything wasn't his idea. We need to remember that. That was not his idea. That was the accuser's idea, the adversary's idea. God was perfectly happy to allow Job to be the man that he was, because he knew Job pretty well. As well as anybody could know Job, better than Job knew himself. Okay? And so he says, but you incited me to ruin him without any reason. It's not a good enough reason to accuse him of something for which he is not guilty. Skin for skin, Satan replied. So now we're getting down to it. A man will give all he has for his own life. But now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Note here, it says, back a verse, it says, Satan asks God to strike his flesh and bones. Notice he asked God to do that. Okay, note that. Then Satan goes out and does it. You say, was that a contradiction? Nope, it's not. They're both true. Both statements are true. God allowed it, okay? And so he was afflicted with these painful sores. You can only imagine what that must have been like.
Couldn't sit down, couldn't lay down.
Blisters, oozing, cracking skin, the blackening of skin, typical of a skin cancer, or who knows, maybe even leprosy. I don't know, some sort of skin disease. Job was taking pieces of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." He replied, "You're talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" And in all this, Job did not sin in what he said. And when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. Well, they did pretty well for 1 week. It says, when they saw him from a distance. Now listen to this. Now, don't jump too far ahead. It's really important to experience the passage as it happens, because these guys went with every good intention. They did. It says, when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud. That's not fake. They are so upset by what they see. He's a shadow of what he was before. And they tore their robes. Notice they're grieving, conventional ancient grieving, and they sprinkled dust on their heads. Another sign of extreme grief and to identify with Job. And then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was.
They were wonderful friends.
For 1 week, they were great.
They just had a mistake and they were working for a wrong assumption.
I tell preachers who counsel, preachers who make visits, be sure that you make lots of room for silence in your ministry. Don't always be rushing in to say something. Some people need to have an opportunity to just be silent in their thoughts. Sometimes and this is true for all of us, but when we're with people who are suffering, especially initially, advice is probably not welcome. 99% of the time, advice and counsel is not welcomed. They need you to be sure that you're listening and hearing them, watching them, and suffering with them. It's amazing what an entree that is to future help, but you can help people by listening to them. So it's such a powerful credential, is the ability to listen. What was it this guy told me once? It was a vice president at Washington Regional years ago said, you hurry up, you hurry up, you show up, and you shut up when you're with people who are suffering. You hurry up, you show up, and you shut up. And that means a lot. That means a lot. It means a lot to people who suffer. As someone who has suffered, and as all of us have, I've always found the people who want to hear what I have to say much more helpful than those who are constantly telling me, well, you need to trust God. You need to trust God. You need to trust God. Sometimes we just need to be allowed to voice our complaint. I can trust God, but you got to hear me first. Listen to me first. That's very important. Sometimes our response to people when they express their sorrow. That's our discomfort that's informing us. We want to fix it because we're uncomfortable hearing them suffer. These guys, to their credit, for one full week, at least appeared to be comfortable with the idea of suffering with Job and just suffering, just to be with him. Of course, it passed after 7 days, and they had lots of advice and ended up being judge and jury on poor Job. But anyway, I've always thought these are great verses. I just wish they'd stuck to it, stuck to being quiet for a week. Yeah.
But Paul, they were still trying to fix it. They were trying to get Job to fix it himself by confessing his sins to God. That's all they were trying to do.
Yeah.
But they got a little too carried away with it.
Well, it became, as arguments sometimes go, you take an opposite position, and then you take a more opposite position to make your argument more powerful. And so they ended up convincing him that he was the worst of adulterers. I mean, they accused him of everything. I mean, it was really bad. Yeah.
Relationship with God. We don't know his friends.
Yeah.
We do know
Yeah.
they said silently, they never once had a prayer conversation with him to comfort that or comfort. But silence did serve a purpose here. The one question, maybe their outcomes because of their relationship with God. We're guessing here.
Yeah.
But at least we know they didn't say a word for 7 days.
Yeah. What do you think about the wife's response?
I think she was just overly practical.
Overly practical.
Yeah, she was wanting him.
Pragmatic.
She was wanting to get him out of his suffering. She didn't care.
Oh, okay. We need a little assistance when committing suicide here.
Well, I
Yeah.
don't know if that was her children. I don't know. They were one of them.
Well, I'm guessing they were her children.
We're guessing if he had more than one, we don't know.
Yeah.
What I'm referring to this is, could it be that my kids are dead, you might as well go too?
She's just going to her hands and saying,
For some reason, that struck me as funny, Mike. I'm sorry. You might as well just go on too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, something's happened to her too.
Now, she might be mad at God.
Well, she has suffered a tremendous loss. These are probably her children. I'm thinking she's thinking that. I think there may be some projection in that. Jared, you had your hand.
You asked what we think about her response. The night that my mom died, my dad's response to that was faithfulness.
Mhm.
Much like Job, he had a very measured response to that tragedy. When we got home that night from her death, he and my brother carried on their daily Bible reading. They had, and I was not in the mood for that.
Mhm.
I wanted a much more vocal, upset reaction, and it took me 2 years to get to where he was that night.
Yeah.
Was my being upset and not ready to just go back to the normal faithfulness, was that wrong? Or was it just we were grieving? So I'm not
It's not wrong.
convinced that her response is entirely evil here.
I think this is a human response to a catastrophic loss.
And she could be blaming him for the death of their kids.
Yeah, there may be something, since the storyteller, Job is whoever the storyteller is of the story, it may be that she had some kind of idea that this was a quid pro quo arrangement too. If this is the way this is going to go with God, stop the sacrifices, blaspheme God, commit suicide, life ain't worth living. Because I've been operating under the idea that we're going to be blessed if you'll just serve God. And here you are, you're slaughtering our sheep and goats all the time to please a God who treats us like this. Is that possible? I think it's possible that she thought that. I can't help but think that Job might have been a little bit uncomfortable with that. He called her a foolish woman. And now I want to tell you something. Job did not stop here with a reasoned, measured response. He has lots of time to express these deep, from the soul cries of agony in these next 40 chapters. Okay? I mean, there's a lot of grief in Job to be expressed.
Paul, you've seen people that, you know, if you've been with a person who's been ill, and you've been through the entire time they've been ill, now in this case it's days probably,
Mhm.
but you've seen that you've grown accustomed to their degradation. So she's seen this fall, this loss, this thing as it occurred. The friends though, the first time they saw him, from the last time.
Shock.
You can imagine,
Yeah.
you probably walked in on people that you loved and you've known your whole life, when they were in the last part of life, and you walked in that and you didn't know who they were.
Right,
I mean, people you've known were intimately aware of.
right.
And you can imagine the shock they had, and her feelings are different than theirs.
Mhm.
Does she speak up again anymore in the book?
None that I
Last time we
recall.
hear from her?
This is it. Her cameo is done.
She may have some more kids.
Yeah.
You know, she disappears from sight. We don't know. Again, that's not germane to the story.
But
So,
some woman does have killed more.
Well,
than
But
one.
right.
I don't know. If you had 10 kids, you got to be at least in your mid-30s. And I don't know how long Job was sick. Doesn't say, does it? The Bible doesn't say.
Those no long bear children then either.
Yeah.
They live longer.
Yep. Yes.
I know I'm going back, but
Mhm.
we first go back to towards the very beginning, and Satan and God or the Lord are having a conversation.
Mhm.
Okay, so what troubles me about that is I'm wondering, is the Lord Christ because of this reason? Because Satan or whoever is being Satan, whatever, addresses as in the fact that he's talking to the Lord, but he's not talking to God, because it says in here, does Job fear God? And if I was talking to you and you're the Lord, I wouldn't say, does he fear God? I would say, does he fear you? See what I'm saying?
Yeah, but that's a small problem for the old. Yeah, because God quite often refers to himself, in the third person. I mean, he's God. So, yeah, I mean,
In the Old Testament, the Lord generally meant God.
right. And it's just capital L-O-R-D. If you notice, that's Yahweh. That's his holy name. Sometimes used for the angel of the Lord, the one that holds the name in his person.
No, I was
So,
just stating
yeah.
that, because, there's people that believe that here in the Old Testament, all of this was Christ instead of God.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that that's right.
But we call Christ and God the same.
right, they're the same. Yeah, they're the same. They're different, but they're the same.
I think there's a sense in which they're all one being. I actually do. I think there's a sense in which because they're spirit, and they're not like us. I think of them kind of like an amoeba. God can put himself out here and he can put himself out.
That's right.
That's maybe a strange way to look at it.
Yeah, I get it.
But I think that they're so together that they might as well be one.
Paul
Okay.
mentioned this class before, but, and I may have, I apologize if I have, but it's interesting. I'm still convinced this is the book that Mark Twain based the book Letters from Earth on. Because he wrote a book, a comedy, around Letters from Earth written by the devil back to Archangel Michael.
Okay.
Talking about what did God create down here? It's
Yeah.
all comedy.
Yeah.
But remember, Mark Twain was somewhat not.
He was an agnostic, yeah.
Samuel, he was an agnostic.
But
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's hilarious that he stated he made light of that conversation.
Yes.
He realized that in this case,
Yeah.
that he was questioning, why don't we just get down here? He's going back and forth there just to look around. So,
I want to close with this last, we are privy to things that happened in heaven before Job's suffering. We're privy to the reasons of his suffering. And yet, at the same time, how much do we really know about the reason? I mean, seriously. Why did God allow this? We don't have the answer to that question. We do not have the answer to that question. Doug?
42 years I taught science and was a Christian and had to deal with this. I'm gonna run it real quick. God said, I take care of the birds of the field, and what did he provide? Water, food, and shelter. And if there's enough of that, reproduction will occur. Okay? And that's the plight of man. It always has been. Now, this whole issue, for as well off as Job did, and all he had, in the end, he lost everything to the greed other men and so forth, and the weather, which is there. That God, God's first law is there's got to be death. There's got to be death in the world that he created. And we see it in every situation. And Job was facing this too, and was looking for death to be the answer that he needed. He was willing to die.
But Job's suffering was not merely the result of the degradation and corruption of the human species, of the human body. This was something that happened by design in heaven that was expedited, if you will. The deaths of 10 people and all of these animals and all the theft was expedited by God by allowing Satan to do this. Right, and eventually all of us will suffer this, but this is that issue, is why God allowed it. Now I understand, when the world has fallen, the earth has fallen, needs redemption, and will be redeemed. Romans 8 will be released, will be redeemed from this body of corruption. The whole creation will be this bondage to decay. That's going to end someday, and that is ultimately the answer. You've stumbled right to the doorstep of the answer. Jesus is the answer to this problem with suffering. But they didn't have Jesus in Job's day. They had to make some sense out of what was happening here, and they had no redeemer. What did he do? God is their redeemer. Well, God is the one that was bringing this on him. He's their redeemer. Well, how does this work? You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of questions that these ancients would have had that we don't have now. I'm thinking Jesus fixes this. So,
God didn't bring these things on Job, the devil did.
yeah, he allowed it though. And he does admit, and God does admit, he says, you incited me against him. So God takes responsibility for allowing it. So, why? Though here's the question: why again? Why? And that's the big question. And so, that's, yeah.
There's another thought that I get why he may have allowed it. He realized that the devil was not lying when he said you've got him hedged in. And maybe he wanted to prove to himself that Job really did love him and not just, and remember that he'd given him nothing but good. And so now he's balancing it by giving him enough, all at one time he's giving him enough bad that.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything has to balance, that's all I can say.
Well,
There's no absolute.
this is a very tough lesson. I appreciate everybody's discussion. It's great. Thank you very much. We'll continue on next week. See you guys.